Okay, this video is the next one in the Historic Ordnance series. It's going to be on an improvised mortar tubes. I'm going to give you some information from a U.S. military manual on how to construct these. Now, I have down here pictures of some examples that came off of the battlefield. This one over here was captured in the 1960s. This is a Viet Cong made Sky Horse. That was the nickname they gave to their improvised mortar. I think this one was a 60 millimeter according to the caption when I downloaded the picture. Over here we have some examples of improvised mortars out of Syria. This one down here I believe is also a 60 millimeter. This one up here I believe is likely a 120 millimeter. Now the standard mortar rounds that are used around the world right now are 60 millimeters, which are your platoon level mortar, 81 or 82 millimeter, which is kind of a company level mortar, and a 120 millimeter mortar, which is really a battalion asset. You know, it just depends on the Army. In the U.S. military, our medium mortars are 81s. Former comm blocks, they use 82s. In Vietnam, the Viet Cong would capture our 81 millimeter mortars, and they could still fire those inside their 82 millimeter tubes, but we could not take their captured 82 millimeters and fire them out of our 81 millimeter tubes. Now, we'll go up here. I got a couple drawings that are from the manual. And the particular manual I am using, if camera guy will make sure you can see this good, TM 31-210 Improvised Munitions Handbook from 1969. If you do not have a copy of this, I highly recommend it if you are a militia leader. There is a considerable amount of great information in here that will vastly help you out. This manual was created for Special Forces back in the day. I recommend if you get a hold of a copy of this, make sure to get the paper copy and get one that's like this. They have some that are glossy. I don't know if I would trust the information in those, and truthfully, whatever information you get out of here, be very cautious when you're trying it, especially when it's chemical compounds. You don't know who has altered the information inside that manual. So it's very possible in a guerrilla situation, you have a copy of this manual, you go through, you catch the things they mess up on, you'll be writing notes in the margins about how to change what's in there and actually make it work. Now, I'm going to read you the instructions in here so I don't screw this up too bad. Now the instructions are for improvising a 60 millimeter mortar. From the pictures out of Syria, they are going up to 120 millimeter. I personally would recommend only go up to that 81 or 82 millimeter. Now materials required. First off, you're going to need the mortar projectile or mortar bomb, because if you don't have that, you don't know what size tube you need to get a hold of. You're going to need a metal pipe about 4 feet in length. If you get really audacious, try that 120 millimeter. It looks like you need to go to about 6 feet to 7 feet in length. One end of the pipe must be threaded. The pipe must also be structurally sound. There must not be dents in it that would interfere with the mortar going down the tube smoothly. You don't want it catching. There must not be any ruptures or cracks anywhere in the pipe. As much as possible, get as high a quality steel pipe as you can. If you're really not sure the quality of the steel, if the pipe is corroded, well, we'll get to it. For when you use these, I'll get into what to do with that one. Now you're going to need a threaded end cap that fits the pipe that you have. Now for diameters of the pipes, For 60 millimeter, you need 2.5 inch diameter. For 81 or 82 millimeter, you're going to need approximately a 3.25 inch diameter pipe. And for 120 millimeter, you're going to need a 4.75 inch pipe or around there. You want the mortar to be a little bit snug, but not so snug that you have to force it down in there. You want it to slide freely, but you don't want so much room around the mortar that it's going to bang back and forth as it's going out. Now, you're going to need a firing pin for this mortar. Recommendations is a bolt around 1/8 of an inch in diameter or 3 millimeters and at least 1 inch in length, around 2.5 centimeters. You're going to need 2 nuts that fit that bolt. You're going to need a file and you're going to need a drill. Now, if we can close in up here, camera guy. First we're going to go over the construction of our end cap here. In the dead center of that end cap, you are going to drill a hole going through that'll be 1/8 inch in diameter or the appropriate diameter for the bolt that you have. Must go all the way through. Then you're going to take your bolt, which is going to be your firing pin. Take your file and you're going to round out the end. Make it a little bit conical shaped. You don't want it, filed to a point where it may not engage the primer at the base of the mortar shell. You want it rounded. You're going to put one nut on the bolt, put the bolt through the hole then, and then the other nut on the inside. You want at least 1/4 inch of bolt sticking past a nut, at least. Then snug everything up. Take your end cap, camera guy. You're going to screw it to the base, the threaded end of your mortar tube. And you have your improvised mortar tube. Before you would screw that on there, I recommend going through, cleaning out any rust that could be on the inside of the pipe. If you got to use some type of wire type brush or something to just scrub it out, clean it out as much as possible so less interferes with the mortar going in. Do it, make it a lot easier. Now for employing this mortar, there's a couple ways you can do this. You can bury it partway in the ground like it shows in the manual, or you can do, like in the pictures that I showed you, you can do an improvised stand. That stand could be a cannon type mount like you see a lot in Syria for some reason. You can do a bipod. You could do a tripod. I've seen improvised mortars pictures where the front was a tripod. You can also do a T-shaped leg. If you want to come down here, camera guy, close in on this one. As you see, it's just a single leg coming down and then a bar coming across to stabilize. And I'll come back up here. Now, if you do the improvised stands in front, you are going to need to make sure that you're going to have some type of base plate. That base plate is going to be taking the full force of when this mortar gets launched out of there. So you may have to get a metal plate, do a couple arched pieces of metal, and then screw that to the sides or bolt that to the sides of the end cap. Or to the side of the tube, depending on how you figure it out. Remember, you will need to be able to take this end cap off every once in a while to refile the end of that bolt in case it starts to dull down. Now, instructions for this here. How to use. Bury the launching tube in the ground at the desired angle so that the bottom of the tube is at least 2 feet underground. So half of the tube in the ground. If you're using a very rusty pipe, you can't guarantee the integrity of the pipe. You might want to go this route of, when you use it, of burying part of it in the ground. But keep in mind, that tube that's buried in the ground like this, you're only going to be dropping it in. Your rounds are only going to be going to the exact same location on your target. You're not going to be able to shift it right, shift it left, push the rounds out, pull the rounds in. It's going to be dropping in that same location every time you drop a round in there. Same location being relative, you're going to have a plus or minus of so many meters. Adjust the number of increments in the rear finned end of the mortar projectile to get the desired distance. And there is a chart in the manual here for what to do. And then it talks about prepping the individual mortar rounds itself, which I'm not going to go into. I will mention here one of the cautions. The round will fire as soon as the projectile is dropped into the tube. So keep all parts of the body behind the opened end of the tube. Don't be in front of it and try catching one of these mortar rounds. Don't be a football star. It ain't going to turn out the way that you think. It's very, very simple to construct. It's just basic materials. A pipe that's in good condition, not bent, not ruptured. The correct interior diameter for the mortar that's going to go inside. Remember, that's the most important part, is the interior diameter. End cap. A bolt, which is going to be your firing pin. And 2 nuts to hold the bolt in place. Now you're probably thinking, well, why not just use a shorter bolt and only the 1 nut? You could do that, but you're going to want to have some spare bolts with you in case you got to replace that then. Every once in a while you're going to have to go through, re-round out the end of that bolt. Remember, this is not the same as the firing pin in an actual mortar launcher. You're using improvised materials that aren't up to the same specs. So be advised on that. Now you can use, and this was proven in Vietnam, you can use the launchers, tubes from the single-use anti-tank rockets like the Law, the M72 series and RPG-18 series, and potentially the US AT-4. You can use those as mortar tubes also. What you want to do, the base of your tube, if it is the anti-tank rocket, you're going to have one end of it that's going to be metal. That's where the rocket motor ignites. That's going to be the end of your mortar tube, because that's going to be where your mortar is going to ignite when you drop it in. And on the end of that tube, you're going to want to put a piece of wood or something, secure it to the end. And you're going to want to put a nail up through that wood, dead center of the tube. You're going to want to go through, file the end of that nail after you get it through there to round it out. Then you're going to hand adjust the angle that you need. Drop your round inside and fire it off. But be advised, it's not going to last forever. Remember, they were designed for single use. How many rounds is it going to go through before you have a catastrophic failure? I can't say for certain. Now, I did come across some basic information. If you're going to go through, make an improvised stand for the mortar tube. The standard range of elevation is 45 degrees up to 80 degrees in elevation. You don't want it to go straight up. You don't want 90 degrees. If it goes straight up, guess what? It's going to come straight down. Now, if you're going to think that you're going to do like they did in Saving Private Ryan, you know what scene I'm talking about. Near the end of the movie, they take those 60 mil mortar rounds, bang them on the end of the base plate, and then chuck them like hand grenades, get a little bit of extra distance out of that mortar. Don't recommend it. From talking to people who used to be mortars in the infantry before they became engineers, they said you could do that with the mortars from World War II. But the thing is, after World War II, we went to rocket-assisted projectiles in our mortars, and pretty much everyone else around the world did too. So what does that mean? Well, if you try doing that with a modern mortar, you're going to nail it, set off that primer, and then you're going to have jets literally come out the side right around here and burn the hell out of your hand. How do you know if it's a rocket-assisted projectile? You're going to have this little extended piece coming down here, this pipe coming off the back of the mortar projectile, and there's going to be holes drilled in it. Those holes are meant to send the flame outward, give you a little bit extra push behind it, and they also set off those augmentation charges or incremental charges on the end of that mortar also to give it that additional range. There you go. You got the basic information that I can come across for producing an improvised mortar tube. And as always, be advised. Do not produce one of these unless you are in a survival or guerrilla situation. If you do, you have created a destructive device. You will get caught. You will go to federal prison for a very long time. So take that under advisement. Now, for all my engineer brothers across the Patriot and militia movements, always remember, essayons.